Welcome to today's webinar, Assessing the Home, Preparing Your Client and Their Life Care Plan to Return Home After a Catastrophic Injury. This webinar is hosted by Medical and Life Care Consulting Services, a case management and nurse consulting firm headquartered in Massachusetts. We're excited that you've joined us for this presentation. My name is 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 and I'm the moderator for today's webinar. This webinar is anticipated to run about 50 minutes, with an additional 10 minutes provided for questions and answers. Participant audio will be on mute throughout the duration of the webinar, and we ask that you submit questions using the question and answer feature within the Zoom webinar dashboard. Post-webinar, we'll send an email with a link to a short survey and access to an on-demand playback of this webinar. Again, we're excited to host today's webinar and look forward to an opportunity to work with you. This webinar is designed for attorneys, paralegals, and medical legal professionals working on cases involving catastrophic injuries. A catastrophic injury is, by definition, a life-changing event where an individual can sometimes spend weeks or even months in a hospital or rehabilitation center. While in facilities, a person often learns to manage their disability and limitations in a controlled, accessible environment. But what happens when they're ready to go home? Is their home ready for them? In today's webinar, our presenter, April Pettengill, discusses how to effectively assess the home and identify areas that will be a challenge. She'll explore the common household fixtures and setups to identify the obstacles that will prevent a person from being independent in their home environment. She discusses how to plan for the required modifications and the cost associated with those modifications. And lastly, how to find and work with contractors and best practices for efficiently communicating the individual's needs and project expectations. Our presenter today, April Pettengill, has over 34 years of experience as a registered nurse. She's worked in the hospital setting in geriatrics, pediatrics, telemetry, and orthopedics. For the last 31 years, she has been a case manager for work-related injuries and illnesses. Ms. Pettengill has extensive experience with catastrophic injuries, and in 2004, she became certified as a nurse life care planner. In 2005, she expanded her areas of expertise by attaining the Medicare Set-Aside Consultant certification and has been writing MSAs ever since. April is a member of AANLCP since 2004 and actively works on the conference committees and most recently as a secretary on the CNLCP certification board from 2007 to 2018. April, over to you.
Thank you, 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 So we are going to be talking about how to assess the home for the injured and disabled individual. The American with Disabilities Act, or ADA, set forth guidelines for modifications for accessibility for the individual in the public space and in the work environment. There are no guidelines for the home or for the individual home. So many contractors fall back on ADA guidelines as a way to be consistent with their recommendations. We're also going to talk about a couple of other ideas and philosophies, including universal design, accessible design principles, and usable design principles. We will be defining and discussing these during today's webinar. So on our first screen, we can see here that the ADA defines a disabled individual as a person who has a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more of their major life activities. They may be perceived to have that impairment as well, or they might have a history of it in the record. So all of these would qualify a person to be disabled. And again, as I said, it only pertains to public areas, employers with over 15 employees, public transportation, and telecommunication. Next slide, please. So we've had an injury, and these are kind of the generalized steps for a person to recover. And I think most people kind of may understand this, but I just want to go through it and just make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page with how things go. So an initial hospitalization focuses on the diagnosis and the repair of the damage. They try to get the person just as minimally functional as possible so that they can be discharged. They're not looking for long-term. They're not looking to get the person 100% recovered, but just to get their function as best as they can at that point. Following that, a person will go to acute inpatient rehabilitation or subacute, and sometimes both, depending upon the extent of their injury. As Gigi said in the introduction, these areas are where the person's going to learn how to adjust to their disability. They're going to learn more about functioning, but it's in a very controlled environment. It's an accessible environment, and it makes it a little bit easier for the person to learn those things. When they go home, now they are in a different situation where they have many obstacles that they have to overcome. They may continue home-based physical therapy and occupational therapy, or they may do so in the outpatient rehabilitation setting. Oftentimes, a therapist will go to the home and look at the home to see if there's equipment or basic modifications that need to be done. And next slide, please. Thank you. So the therapist, as I said, is going to look at the things like access to the bathroom. They're going to look at ability to get in and out of the home. They may look at bedroom space and need for equipment, but it's going to be kind of a temporary thought process. They're not looking for long-term solutions for the individual or how that's going to affect the rest of the family members or other people living in that environment. So when you're doing a life care plan, you're looking long-term. So you need to think about how are your modifications going to affect everybody that's in that environment. Having a hospital bed in the middle of the living room may work for a few weeks or even a few months, but after a while, the person that's in that bed is going to feel very exposed. The family's going to feel frustrated because now they've got somebody there they're trying to work around. Another person who may be of assistance in helping you do an assessment is what we call a certified aging in place specialist, or a CAP specialist. This is a certification that was put together by the National Association of Home Builders, and it specializes in making modifications to a home for an individual. And again, they may not be looking at how do these modifications affect the rest of the family or the aesthetics of the home. So accessibility is more than bathrooms and entryways. We need to think about how a disability affects the person's daily routine. And just so we're all on the same page, I put this chart here that talks about IADLs and ADLs. So ADLs are your activities of daily living, and your IADLs are instrumental activities of daily living. So when you have a disability, it could potentially affect any or all of these. So we need to think about all of these areas when we're doing the assessment of the home. Just for fun, and you don't need to do this right now, but try these experiments. If you take your desk chair, a rolling desk chair, and you try to go from your desk to your bathroom. What kinds of things do you encounter on your way? Do you have thresholds that you have to go over? Are there obstacles like rugs or boxes or stairs or things in your way? Then another thing you can try is close your eyes and try to navigate around the kitchen. See if you can find your pots and pans and your knives and the things that you need to do your cooking and cleaning of your dishes. Now, let's say you have someone who's had a stroke or is unable to use one side of their body. Try doing your dishes with one hand behind your back and see how difficult that really is. And that may give you some idea of what a person with a disability is going to have to deal with. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk also about some different design philosophies, accessible, universal, and usable designs. These are building concepts that have come up in the last few years, actually probably 10 to 15 years, where there's some similarities between them, but there's also some differences. So an accessible design is for the individual. It is kind of like the ADA definition, where we're looking to modify the site for the individual. It can be a product or a service that allows for the person to use them with a modification. This philosophy is for the individual and may not take into account other people in the home. Therapists and builders tend to use this philosophy when they're looking at modifications. But as a life care planner, you need to also think about other people in the home and how is it affecting that home to function. Universal design, on the other hand, focuses on changes in the home that make the environment usable for all people, regardless of their age, their disability, or their abilities. It may be cognitive or low vision. We also, need to think about those things if that is included in their disability. So these products address everybody's needs and everybody's users, all of the users in the area. It's not just the individual. So usable design is more of a measure of the interactive user experience in the environment around them. Usable designs are easy to learn, they're efficient, sometimes they're fun, they're intuitive, so someone with a cognitive disability would be able to pick them up pretty quickly. They're human-friendly and not focused on technology. So a really good example of this would be touch screens. We have them all around us now. We're on their phones, they're on your tablets, they're on your dashboard of your car. Everything is, where do I touch to get to do what I want to do? Now, one of the things about usable designs is they need to be somewhat error tolerant. In other words, if you don't happen to hit that icon specifically in the middle, it's still going to work. So I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I have apps that have my fingerprint that I need to use. And if I don't put it on there just right, it'll say not recognized, and that gets really frustrating. So error tolerance needs to be also considered in a usable design. Here's some examples of the difference between universal design and accessibility. And I'm not going to go through these. You can kind of read through them on your own. But today we're going to focus kind of on the second one, which is modifications for somebody with a disability versus a home that is already accessible and has a universal design as the basis for its when it was built. Okay, so now we're going to get into how to perform the assessment. And we're going to do this kind of on a room by room basis. So, but hopefully some of the concepts that we learn in one room will go over into the next room. So we'll start on the outside and work our way in. So you can see that there are different, there's two different houses that are here, and both of them have a garage, which is great. It allows the person to be out of the weather when they get home. And one of the things you want to look at is in the gray house, you'll see a nice little walkway right next to the garage that goes up to the front entry. And if that, instead of having a little step, had been made a slope, which could have easily been done at the time of the build, that would allow for that to be a nice accessible area. Weather would come off, there would be no icing issues or that type of thing. And it would allow someone in a wheelchair, in a walker, using crutches, to be able to get up in there, or someone even with low vision who may not notice a step. If you look at the White House, yes, there's a garage there, and that looks really fantastic. But if you notice to the left of the garage, there's some stairs, and it looks like the main area of living is above the garage. So in order for the person to get in there, even if they're in the garage, they're probably going to need some way to get in. It may be a lift, it may be a ramp, it may be some different options that we're going to talk about a little later. When you're talking this many steps, a ramp may not be the best option, only because if you make a ramp so it's safe for that many steps, it's going to need to be really, really long. One thing that we don't think about, but are everywhere, are door handles. It's much easier for a person with a disability to use a lever handle than a turn handle. Someone with limited motion can push down on a lever and open the door, whereas a turn may not be something that they can do. There's the one in the middle, is kind of a interesting one where it looks like it's just a pull open one. It's probably a gate or something like that. But you'll notice that the opening for the fingers to go through is pretty small. So people may not be able to get their hand in there to open that up. The door that you have here probably has two doors, probably a screen door and then the interior door, which means the doors are going to open in opposite directions. Even if that doorway is 36 inches wide, you'll notice that there's a metal, or it looks like maybe marble or brick or something right next to it. So that door's not going to swing all the way open. So your 36 inches has now shrunk down to 34 inches for the person to be able to get through there. And if the interior door doesn't open all the way, now you're even smaller. So a person in a wheelchair or trying to maneuver a walker through there may be bumping their arms or smashing into the doors as they're trying to get into the house. Garages are great, but they often become storage areas. And so we have to think about what's going to happen to all that stuff that's in there if now the person has to park in there, or if we need to have the extra space for ramping or lifts or things like that. Stairs, if you notice the top left one, there's 3 or 4 stairs there, but there's space along the wall. So you could put a ramp in there pretty successfully, and it wouldn't take up a lot of space in the garage. On the bottom left, there's many more steps. So that's going to be more challenging. A ramp is probably not going to be an option here. So you may have to look at other ways to get the person into the home from that area. On the bottom right, is a great example of a kind of a universal design where you've got a nice sloped driveway leading up to the garage. The garage appears to be on the same level as the main living floor, so there's probably not going to be any steps. So that's a nice kind of modification to think about if the house wasn't built that way originally. Carports are another option if they don't have a garage. So they're easy to put up. They're inexpensive. They can be adjusted to the area around the house. They can be connected to the house. If you have a detached garage and you want to have an area for the person to go from the garage to the house, carports are great options for that. Next slide. So bedrooms are going to be the next area that we look at. And as I said, we don't really want a hospital bed in the middle of our living room forever. So we want to be able to have the person have their own space. Something to think about is how high is the bed? On the bottom left, you'll see a bed, and that's actually on the floor. You can't really tell it from that picture, but that bed's on the floor, which isn't going to work for someone with a mobility issue. It may not work for someone with low vision. They're going to trip on that bed just trying to, get into it. On the top right is a bedroom that has lots of extra things in it that perhaps with removing those things, there would be enough room for equipment. There would be room for the person to get a commode next to the bed, maybe the wheelchair next to the bed. You would want to take up that area rug because that's a trip spot. So those are things that you can do at low or no cost to a plan, but allow the bedroom to become accessible. On the bottom right, there's a nice bedroom there. Looks like it's a nice setup, nicely lit. There's a good sized bed. It looks like it's at a good height, but the walls are very close to the bed, or the bed is very close to the walls. So being able to get a walker or crutches or a wheelchair in there would become an issue. On the top left, you can't really see it from that particular picture, but there was nice space on the side of that bed. So you could walk all the way around the bed. You could maneuver a wheelchair all the way around it. You had room for crutches, commode. The only challenge I see with that particular setup is where the lights are located. They're behind the person on the wall. So if you have a mobility issue or even low vision, turning around to find that light switch to shut it off may become an issue. So continuing in the bedroom, we need to think about where are the clothes kept. So the same picture that we had in the previous slide, you've got a nice bureau there. So that's pretty accessible for somebody with mobility issues. The only thing I would recommend is that you make sure that that bureau is attached to the wall so that it doesn't accidentally tip over. On the bottom left, you've got a bed, looks like it's got some space. The closet is very close to one side of the bed there, and it may be difficult for the person to get to. So you want to think about what can you do to make that better. You could put in perhaps a pocket door, or you might take the doors off altogether. And those are, again, pretty inexpensive things to do, that but make that now an accessible kind of situation. On the top right, you have a bed that looks like it's a good height. You've got some nice lighting in there. You've got room at least on this side of the bed, which would be okay. With the closet, you can see in the middle of the picture in the closet, there's a hinge, which means that that's probably a bifold door. So that's going to pull into the room for the person to access the closet. That's going to be difficult for a person with using equipment to be able to get into and not have to worry about, well, where's the door going to go? Is it going to hit me? Am I going to be able to roll in there with my walker or my crutches? So you want to think about, again, maybe another door option on that particular closet. On the bottom on the right, you've got pretty nice setup there. You've got some drawers on the bottom the person can get to. You've got a nice hanging space. It looks like the door's open wide enough so the person can get in there. The only thing I would add to this to make it really accessible is, instead of having those racks up high, I would allow for a fold down rack. And you can get those for $139 on Wayfair, and they're very easy to put in. You don't need a contractor for it. And all the person needs is a hook or a reacher just to get up to that rack and pull it down. Then they can access their clothes. Kitchens and dining rooms. So here we see lots of different kitchen options. We need to think about what kind of cooking surface do they have? Where is it located? Is it a stove or is it a cooktop? Do they wash their dishes in the sink or is it in a dishwasher? Can they get to the dishwasher? You can see the gentleman in the top left there in a wheelchair, and he's accessing his dishwasher. And that's a pretty good setup for him. Interestingly enough, they do not make a dishwasher that opens sideways. They all open with the door down. So you want to make sure that there's room around the dishwasher to be able to get in there, and a place for them to put the dishes when they take them out. They don't want to be holding them on their lap and, try to roll around when you've got glasses or breakable dishes there that could easily slide off and break. At the bottom right, you see a gentleman in a sink. The sink bottom is open so he can roll underneath of it. He's got a nice counter space there. If he needs to, he can go over onto the cooktop to put some storage. So that's really good. In the middle on the right, on the left, you see a lady that's doing dishes, and it looks like she probably can't get to her sink very well. So that might be a challenge to do the dishes in that situation. On the bottom left, you've got a nice setup there. You've got an open area around the table so the person with the mobility devices can get around. On the top right is a close-up of the refrigerator, and you'll notice that the handle is low, which is great for somebody who is in a wheelchair. They can get to that handle and not have to worry about trying to reach up really high to be able to get to them. In the middle on the right is a nice young lady. It looks like she's cooking something there on her cooktop, and that could be somewhat dangerous for people with mobility issues, only because they can't get their wheelchair underneath of that. So maybe a cooktop without the oven underneath might be a good option. Continuing with the cooking mode here. So on the top left, you'll see the gentleman. He's got his oven up high, which is great. The other thing that really is nice about that setup is that when the oven doors open, right next to it is a place for him to put hot stuff. He's not going to have to carry it across the kitchen to try to find a spot to put it down, which is a safety issue for people with using mobility devices, right? They even crutches or a walker. When they pull that out, what do they do with it? The hot meal when they're trying to, move it around the kitchen. Cooktops. You've got gas versus electric in the middle pictures there. Gas is a great option. It heats fast, but for a person with low vision issues, they could easily catch a pan on those grates and spill the contents. So a flat cooktop, electric cooktop, a conduction cooktop is even better, because then as soon as the meal, the hot pan is removed, the cooktop cools down. So there's no chance of accidentally putting your hand on the top and burning. The bottom two, you see some ovens. You would think a wall oven would be great, what you see on the bottom right. The challenge with that is there's no place near it to put the hot stuff as it comes out of the oven. And in the bottom left, that oven is really low. This gentleman's even, standing up is bending way over to get to it. So that might, again, not be a great place or a great option for a person with a disability. The nice lady on the top right there, she's getting into her silverware drawer to try to work on stuff. But if you notice, her prep area is way at her shoulder levels. And if you have challenges with shoulder mobility, or you are in a chair like she is, that's going to be very, very difficult to work consistently up on that level. Now, these things are not specifically modifications, but can help with some of the issues that the people have. You see a cup cleaner that suction cups to the bottom of the sink there, and you can get that for about $28. The rocker knife is good for one-handed use. That runs about $47 to $50. The cutting board, and the next one over on the top, that you can't see it. It's got suction cup on the bottom, so it's not going to slide around. Even though she's using two hands, it's designed for one-handed use. She's got a little cucumber in there that she's cutting up. Some of them have little picks in them, so you can stick the food on it, so it's not going to slide around. And that runs about $135. The can opener, I like that idea. You put it on, you push the button, and it goes around the can. You don't have to hold on to it. And, cuts the can opener, so that there's no need to hold on to the can and try to crank a can opener. That runs about $39, $40. The pull tab on the bottom left, that's really nice. I mean, I even have trouble sometimes getting underneath those little pull tabs. So that's a nice thing to have. That runs about $37. It's a little expensive, but it's a good option. The pan holder is a fantastic idea. It suction cups to the top of the stove there, holds the pan, prevents it from sloshing around, allows a person with one hand to be able to stir and not have to hold on to the pan. And that's, $20. It's not a big cost item, but it's a great thing for the person to have there. Then you've got the bowl with the suction cup, and this, so they can use a scooper if they need to use one-handed stuff. I want to show you a couple of videos on some feeding options. And even though, again, this is not specifically a modification, it's something to think about in terms of people who can't feed themselves. It may reduce some of your costs in terms of care in the home. So the first one is the Meal Buddy.
The Meal Buddy Assistive Feeder. The simple and smart way to excellent service. Feeding yourself has never been easier. With one-touch push operation, the user will now be able to feed themselves. The user can select between 3 bowls to eat from. Not only will the meal buddy scoop from the bowls, but it will also wipe off excess food from the spoon and even wipe drips off the bottom. The meal buddy is virtually ready to use right out of the box. And with customizable spoon positions and bowl selection, it is not only simple to use, but smart. With intelligent programming available, the user can adjust everything from speed to selection to food quantities, and even pause anytime during the meal. The Meal Buddy's contemporary design has magnetic bowls to keep in place and are dishwasher safe. Nothing beats the Meal Buddy for user-controlled assistive feeding.
And the next one is the Obi, which is a similar kind of product. So you can see from the slide there, there's a significant difference in the cost of those two items. But in the long run, that may reduce some of your, care that's needed in the home. All right, next slide. Wants to go again. Okay, so drawer handles might be something that you don't necessarily think about, but you should start to think about them a little bit. So if you have someone who's wearing a brace, sliding your hand into the top right might be a little challenging. How, again, can they fit their fingers in there? Do they have enough finger strength to pull that open? The same is true with the one underneath of it that looks like a clamshell. Can they get their hand up in there and have enough strength to pull that open? On the bottom right is a cabinet with no handle at all. Maybe that might be a little challenging for someone with some cognitive issues to figure out, like, how do I even get into this thing, right? On the top left, we've got the knobs. Now, again, finger strength may be an issue. Also, if you're trying to pull open a drawer and you're pulling on one side, it may not pull straight. So they're going to have to go back and forth between the two knobs to try to get the drawer open. Good option are these long handles that look like, I don't know, lines, but they're actually away from the drawers a bit, and you can also use them for cabinets. As long as there's enough space for the person to get their fingers in there, these are great options. Light switcher, pretty much the regular normal switches that we have will work for most people. We are starting to see more rocker switches put into homes, which again, it's kind of a quote unquote universal design thought process that, anyone can figure out how to use that. You can do it if you can just lift your arm up and down, you can use it. The one that I really like is the one in the middle on the bottom, where there's 4 switches and you have to try to figure out what each one does. And if you have a cognitive issue, you're going to have to go through that every time trying to figure out, okay, which button do I want to turn on this light or to do whatever. The one on the top left where it's a push button switch, that may turn on that light or it may turn on the light in the room. I'm not really sure, but again, is that something that people can do easily? Is it intuitive? Maybe not. The pull chain on a lamp. We tend not to think about these very often, or at least I don't always think about it. So the person's got to have enough strength to pinch that chain, pull it down, and turn that light on. Now, if they have some challenges with their mobility, upper extremity mobility, pinching might be a problem, pulling it down might be a problem. They may end up pulling the lamp over just to try to turn it on. So that might be an option where a voice activated or a smart home possibility might be a thing to think about. And we'll talk about that in another slide or two. All right. Oh my gosh, bathrooms, we could spend a whole hour on bathrooms alone, but we're not going to. So we want to get through these slides. So grab bars, pretty much everyone can think about, yes, we need grab bars around the toilet. Things to think about, though, in terms of grab bar placement is, does the person have to turn around to grab the bar? That could be a challenge. You want to make sure that the grab bar is placed on a wall and not on a cabinet that could be easily pulled over. The one on the top right there is a really neat thing. It kind of folds away so that if you have someone who doesn't need it, it can be taken out of the way so it's not intrusive. You see the nice lady in the shower there. She's got her grab bar, plus she's got her commode. The only thing that may be a challenge with that particular bath seat is, can the person get by that arm on this side, or is it going to be an issue with them getting in and out? I put the picture of on the top left in there because that is the tiniest bathroom shower I've ever seen. It's supposed to be accessible, but I can tell you, first of all, the doorway is too narrow, and that glass door, you want it to open toward us for a couple reasons, safety reasons, and primarily because if the person falls and they're blocking the door, EMS will not be able to get in there. So it's got to open toward us, which means it's going to hit the sink. And if it hits the sink, you can't get by it. Plus, the toilet is very low. So a person that has problems with lower extremity mobility may not be able to get onto that toilet. So continuing with our bathroom, see at the top left there, we've got a nice toilet with a nice long grab bar, nicely accessible for people, lots of space for a person with a wheelchair to be able to transfer on and off. I can tell you that putting in tile like that all around the toilet and in the bathroom is going to cost you about $15,000. Yes, it looks nice. It's easy to clean, but it's very, very expensive. It's labor intensive. The one thing I would change in this particular situation is I would move the toilet paper holder about 8 inches forward. That looks like it's a good knee catcher right there. And if someone's got decreased sensation, that's going to be a problem. These walk-in tubs seem like they would be a really nice option for people who like their tubs. Think about the person has to get into it, the water has to fill up, they take their tub, now they're sitting there while the water drains out. They have to wait for that to happen before they can get out. If they have a handheld shower attached to it, and now you got to think about what's going on around it. Everything has to be such that it's waterproof. There needs to be safety mats or drains outside of this tub so that there's not going to be a problem with slipping when they get out. In the bottom right-hand picture there, that's a great picture. I love that setup. The toilet seat, the bath seat flips down so the person can get on it. There's room underneath so they can tuck their feet underneath of it. The handheld shower's right there. If the person doesn't need it, it folds up for everybody else in the household to use. Think universal design. The only thing I would do different is I would change the grab bar is on the other side of the handheld shower, and the shower head is close to the person. Now that might be functionally okay, but their tendency is going to be to grab onto that shower head to try to get out. That could be a problem if it's not secure. In the middle, we have a nice setup in terms of very accessible. You got a tub, a shower in the middle of your bathroom though. So that means that every time you take a shower, everything's going to get wet. I have seen designs where actually people sit on the toilet and use it as a shower. So that may not be a good option. A quick word about sinks and levers. You want to make sure that you use a lever rather than turn knobs. If the person has one hand or they have some issues with cognitive problems, turning the knob may not be intuitive for them. The levers are great. People with limited mobility can do that. Everyone can figure it out. You lift it up, it turns on, you push it down, it turns off. You can see the gentleman in the wheelchair who's sitting at his sink. He can't turn around to spit after he brushes his teeth because he can't get close enough to that sink. Well, it seems like it might be a good idea to have the raised sink. You can see with the gentleman on the top left, that sink is too high. They should have lowered that about 4 to 6 inches so he could still access it. He can get to what he needs to do. And the height of the sink edges is really great because there's not going to be a lot of spills. That's fantastic. The gentleman in the middle, that's a really nice setup for him. He can wheel his wheelchair underneath the sink. His mirror's right in front of him. He can see what he needs to do. He's got his electric razor right there. That's a great setup. Something to think about when you're doing bathroom modifications. So in the living room, this is a space where people can be together. And so we want it to be an accessible and usable and universal kind of space. So we're going to look at all of our design thoughts and philosophies when we're looking at this. The upper left, that's a nice little sitting area. If they removed that table in the middle, they could have access with people using wheelchairs or walkers. It's a no cost modification, easy to do. On the top and on the right, that's also another nice little setup there. I would remove the area rug and maybe move the table away from the couch there a little bit. It's got nice lighting. It's got a nice overhead light. Plus you also have natural light coming through the windows. Something to think about is lighting with people with low vision. You know, what kinds of shadows are they going to see? On the bottom left, it's a little crowded. It's going to be a little difficult for, people with assistive devices to get in there and be able to sit down on those couches to use them. On the bottom right, great lights. You can see during the day where there's a lot of natural light coming into this space. The question would be, what's going to happen in the nighttime? You can see over the stairs, there's some what they call can lights, which are up in the ceiling, but I don't see any over the sitting area. So which means that the light's probably coming from way up high. So it may cause shadows on the floor, which may be confusing for people. It's a great area for wheelchair accessibility. It's nice and open. Again, I would remove the area rug, which is a tripping hazard, and probably move the coffee table away from the couch just a little bit. Stairs are also a major consideration when you're looking at options here. So inside versus outside. Outside, you can do ramps pretty easily. We want to think about ADA, which is the accessible philosophy, where you raise it up 1 inch over 1 foot. So if you've got 3 stairs that are 7-inch risers, you got to have a 21-foot ramp. If they're 6 foot or 6-inch riser, you got to have an 18-foot ramp. So that's kind of something to think about. Stair chairs, great option inside, but you can see in the bottom left there, that's a very tight situation for that lady to be going up and down the stairs. If you have somebody with wheelchairs, you got to think about what's going on the top. Do they have a wheelchair up there as well as a wheelchair at the bottom? Metal ramps are great for longevity. If you're going to do wooden, think about adding a rubberized paint or a paint with grit in it so that it won't become slippery in the weather. Other options are elevators or lifts. You can see at the bottom right there, you've got a lift that could probably be in a garage that would get you up into the home. In the middle, this is a lift, or what they call a personal vertical lift, or PV or VPL, which will get, it's inside. It's in a closet kind of situation, so it's almost like an elevator. You've got an exterior elevator and an interior elevator. I was going to show you this video, but since we're getting short on time, I will let you guys research that on your own. So in terms of cost of these different options, a stair chair is going to run you about $2,500 to $3,000. If you need a curve or a 90 in it, it's going to cost a little more. The lifts for full floor cost about $10,000 to $15,000. Elevators are going to run you about $40,000 to $50,000. So if you're tight on money, you may want to think about which is most cost effective as well as aesthetic. Hallways, also, you want to think about spacing. You may want to think about putting in a railing, or if you want to keep it more aesthetic, you can do a chair rail or wainscoting that's like halfway up. So that allows for some place for people with mobility issues to, hold on while they walk through. The upper left there, you see a door that opens into a hallway. If you're looking for accessibility there, if that door's got to be able to go all the way flat so that a wheelchair can get through there, you would have to move some of those little things that are on the wall there and make sure that it opens. You got to have about 5 feet of swing and area for a door to be able to open and lay flat on the ground, on the wall. The bench there is a nice option for people coming in. They can sit, take off their shoes, whatever they need to do. The bottom one is here because I want to show you how confusing hallways can be. So this has got a mirror, which makes it really difficult to figure out where you even are walking. And then the confusion with the wallpaper. So in this case, if you remove those mirrors, it probably would make that a little bit nicer and a little bit easier for people to get through. And you would want to also take out some of the clutter and the obstacles there, which may cause confusion. Laundry. Top loading washers are very difficult for people with mobility issues. You want to go front loading, and there's some different things here that you can see. Front loading with the controls on the front are very important. An area for people to fold their laundry. You can see on the bottom right there, there's a nice lady. She's got an infant on her lap, and she's trying to fold her laundry, sitting on her toilet. So maybe that's the only place she had for her laundry, but it makes it challenging. On the top right, there's a nice counter space there. You got your washer and dryer, and so that's a really good setup. Flex rooms. We used to call them dens or home offices or entertainment rooms, and they can be pretty much any room that can be used for caregiver needs, storage areas. I wanted to show you this Zoom bed, but again, in the interest of time, I will let you guys look it up. But it's a really cool, instead of a Murphy bed, the Zoom bed kind of folds up into the wall like a caterpillar. And in the front of it, it has like a place where you can put an entertainment center or storage areas or bookcases or that kind of thing, so that your space for your caregiver becomes a usable space for the family, and it doesn't have to be looking like a bedroom. I want to touch quickly on voice-activated homes or the smart homes. You can get so many things now activated by your Alexa or your Google or, your Siri. All of those things have now smart appliances or things that will work with them, so they can be voice activated or activated with touchscreen. If you have somebody with dysarthria, which is difficulty speaking, touch screens are great, and you can still use these things. A thermostat on a system like this is about $225. Door locks and cameras, $200 to $400, depending upon how good they are. Plug-in devices, so they're like outlets, and they have a smart option to them. Entertainments like your Fire Stick TV remote is $25, and it works with a lot of televisions. They even have smart dishwashers now, so you can turn them on when you're not in the room. And of course, your iRobot or Roombas to do some cleaning for you. And lastly, safety considerations and emergency considerations when you're doing your modifications and looking at your home assessment. How is that person going to get out if there's a fire? Do you need to plan for a second exit? Have a folder with all of their important information. And I know that has nothing to do with modifications, but it's important so that people know where it is. Can EMS get in? What is their ability to contact emergency services? Again, voice activation is a great option for this. Some people have Life Alert. That works okay, but if they don't have it on, if it's charging, how are they going to get to it? So voice activation is a great option. All right, and so this is just kind of our wrap up. So getting the person home after their injury can be very complex. Lots of things to think about. We could have spent another 3 hours on different modifications and going through all of those things. We just touched on many things to think about. One thing that I didn't talk about, but you should be thinking about, is what happens to the value of the home after you make renovations. Are they even possible? If a person's renting, you may have to rethink everything and start to think about maybe we just create a new space for them. and get a contractor who knows what they're doing. Find a CAPS certified person who can help you if you don't feel comfortable going through a home. Look for people who will give you references and will tell you, you know, I did this home and I did that home, and talk to the homeowners and make sure that the contractor did a good job.
All right. Thank you so much, April, for your presentation today. I'm sure that our audience and future viewers of this webinar have learned a wealth of information. We are at time and we want to be respectful of people's time, so we're not going to host a Q&A, but do invite you to, one, take our survey. You can scan here with this QR code, which will take you to the webinar survey. And then also we're going to send out a link to this on-demand playback, and you can respond with questions if you have questions for us about this webinar, or questions about home modifications if you are working on a case with a catastrophic injury. As a final reminder, just to let everyone know, medical and life care consulting always provides complimentary consultations. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to April directly. Her contact information is here on the lower part of the screen. And as a final reminder, our services do include comprehensive life care planning, medical cost projections, and life care plan projections, future estimates of care, Medicare set-aside allocations, and medical chart reviews and chronologies. Again, thank you for everyone for registering and attending today, and thank you to our presenter, April Pettengill. All right, everyone, have a good day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.